Hello, everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep pulling you stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. Story 1. The House at Maple Grove. Mr. Clarence Whitby. I moved to Maple Grove, Minnesota, in October 2021. Just as the trees were reaching their skeletal peak, I was Avery Brooks, 28, a junior architect, and the refurbished Victorian townhouse was supposed to be my clean slate. It was an intimidating beauty dark wood, high ceilings, and elaborate stained glass windows that threw fractured colors onto the oak floors. The sheer age of the place was initially exhilarating. The sense of atmosphere was immediate. At dusk, the autumn wind became a mournful, constant sound, making the old glass rattle like loose change. The entire house felt enthralled by the approaching chill of winter and the pervasive, almost theatrical dread of Halloween. My enthusiasm lasted exactly 1 week. I first encountered him in the second-floor hallway. The place was a perpetual low-light environment, and the long corridor's single bare bulb was prone to flickering, making my late returns from the office feel like traversing a strobe-lit tunnel. He was Mr. Clarence Whitby, the downstairs tenant, a man of 62 with the stiff posture of a retired civil servant. His deep-set eyes, sunk into a face layered with tight, pale skin, were the color of cold stone. When he moved, his footsteps were precise, heavy, and echoed unnervingly on the hardwood, signaling his exact location through the floorboards. He was the definition of stillness. Whenever I passed him, he would be standing by the mail slot or staring out a window. He didn't speak, he just observed, his presence a heavy, cold weight in the shared air. The subtle violation began with the auditory cues. I would come home after a 12-hour shift, exhausted, and the silence would feel like a fragile shell. I'd be trying to fall asleep when the sound would start a faint, distant sound of children's laughter filtering through the old plaster walls. It wasn't the sound itself that was terrifying, but the way it would suddenly cut off, replaced by the unmistakable, heavy, echoing footsteps of Mr. Whitby passing my door, always well after midnight. It felt as though he was policing the auditory boundaries of the house. I began to feel perpetually watched. I would be sitting at my drafting table, back to the wall, and the sensation would hit me the cold prickle of an unseen stare. I would glance over, and inevitably, the door to the long corridor would be standing slightly ajar when I was certain I had closed it. My rational mind tried to claw its way back. The old house shifts. The foundation is settling. He's just a lonely old man. But the paranoia was a relentless acid, dissolving the peace I had sought. The fear deepened when I started renovating a small study. I was pulling up the old baseboard along the wall that ran parallel to the corridor. The wood was stiff, releasing a puff of cold dust and the musty smell of forgotten age. Shining my phone light into the gap, I saw them. Not the workings of the house, but a tight cluster of scratch marks carved into the plaster. They weren't random. They were sharp, clean, and deep, as if made by a strong, sharp object. They covered a concentrated area about the size of a dinner plate, all clearly visible and completely hidden behind the molding. My terror became absolute. Someone had been back there. Someone had been trapped or waiting, and the only person who possessed that terrifying stillness, who prowled the corridor at midnight, was Mr. Whitby. I replaced the baseboard, securing it with new screws, trying to bury the secret. but the image of those frantic scratches had taken root in my mind. The climax arrived in the dead center of the night. I woke up suddenly, gasping. The time on my phone screen glowed 3:13 a.m. The absolute silence of the house was oppressive, broken only by the nervous hammering of my own heart. I was staring at the wall beside my bed. The light from the street lamp outside cast a faint, cold glow across the peeling wallpaper. And there, scratched into the plaster, precisely at eye level, was a symbol. It was crude, shallow, but devastatingly clear, a simple, perfect circle with a vertical line drawn through it, and 3 short, horizontal lines branching off the right side. It was a carved symbol, not painted, not drawn, but scratched into my wall. I hadn't done it. No one else had been in the room. I felt the cold realization that the violation wasn't just physical, it was intimate. The terror had crossed the final barrier from the corridor into the heart of my sanctuary. I fled. I threw on my clothes, grabbed my car keys, and didn't bother with a suitcase. The old Victorian townhouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a mausoleum. I drove away from Maple Grove before the sun even considered rising. It was hours later. I was hundreds of miles north, driving through a heavy, suffocating fog on an empty highway. My headlights cut 2 desperate, yellow tunnels into the white expanse. I pulled over to a gas station, the only light visible for miles. My hands were shaking too violently to hold the pump. As I stood there, staring into the swirling fog, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message. It was from an unknown number. The message was one short, final line. Thanks for moving in. Story 2, Trick or Treat in the Woods. You know what I miss most about before that night? The weightlessness. That stupid, blissful ignorance you have when you're 24 and you think you're immortal. That everything is just a joke. Halloween 2019. Me, Jenna, Ben, and Leo decided to go ironic trick-or-treating. 4 college grads in cheap, store-bought costumes, crammed into Jenna's '03 Honda Civic. I was a bored vampire. Leo was a pirate. I don't remember what Ben and Jenna were. It doesn't matter. We drove out of downtown Ashland, past the messy student rentals, and headed for the hills. The good houses. The architectural monoliths hidden in the pines. The ones that give out full-sized candy bars, not fun-sized garbage. The air was cold, crisp. It smelled like pine needles and distant wood smoke. Jenna had some stupid Halloween playlist on. We were laughing. As we drove into the subdivision, I remember looking in the rear-view mirror. The road behind us was black, but on the porch of the last house we'd passed, a line of jack-o'-lanterns was lit. Their orange glow reflected in the glass like little embers seeing us off. It's the last image I have of that night that isn't tainted. This neighborhood was different. No sidewalks. The houses were set back hundreds of yards, separated by deep, dark patches of Douglas fir and madrone. Long, gated driveways. Most of the porch lights were off. "This is kind of a bust," Ben muttered, pulling his werewolf mask up onto his forehead. "Keep going," Leo said, already slurring a little from the flask in his pirate coat. "The last house on Mistletoe. They just built it. Looks like a resort. They have to have the good stuff." Jenna sighed but kept driving. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to packed dirt. The streetlights disappeared. There was just our headlights, cutting a white tunnel through the black. And the moon, a weak crescent, just bright enough to turn the treetops into jagged silhouettes against an indigo sky. The car stopped at a cul-de-sac. Ahead of us, a massive iron gate. Lights off. dead. Great plan, Leo, Jenna said. Come on, we're already here. Leo shoved his door open. We'll walk back. Hit a few on the way. Don't be lame. The silence hit us when we got out. It was thick, not city silence. This was forest silence. Deep. The only sound was us. My cheap plastic boots crunched on the carpet of dry leaves. Crunch, crackle, crunch. It sounded obscenely loud. We walked, the beams of our phone flashlights bouncing on the rutted road. We tried 2 houses. No answer. At the third, a tired-looking older woman gave us each a small apple, whispered, "Happy Halloween," and shut the door before we could even say trick or treat. This sucks, Leo complained. I'm cold, I said, pulling my jacket tighter. The woods, they feel like they're watching. You watch too many horror movies. Marisol, Ben chuckled. That's when we heard it. We were walking back toward the car. Ben's chuckle died, and for 1 second, all you could hear was 4 sets of feet on leaves and gravel. Crunch, crackle, crunch, scuff. We stopped, all at once, and the sound continued. Crunch. One more footstep, somewhere off to our right, beyond the range of our lights. It stopped when we did. Hello, Jenna called out, her voice thin. The silence rushed back in, heavy and expectant. I held my breath. My heart gave one hard thump against my ribs. It's just a deer, Ben said, but the mockery was gone from his voice. He aimed his phone's flashlight into the trees. The weak iPhone beam slid over gnarled trunks, and it stopped. It was there, just far enough away to be indistinct, but too close to be mistaken. It was not a deer. It was tall, upright, draped in something dark, like a hooded rain slicker or a tarp. It wasn't moving. It just stood, perfectly still, between 2 pines where the shadows were deepest. The only part of it the light caught was the absence of it, a man-shaped void. Oh my God, I whispered. My throat was sandpaper. Hey, Leo yelled, bravado rising from the booze. That's not funny. Man, come out. The figure did not move. We started backing up toward the car, a tight, panicked cluster. Ben kept his light trained on it. Go, go, Jenna urged. We took maybe 10 steps, and Ben's beam wavered. When he snapped it back, the space between the trees was empty. A wave of relief washed over me, immediately replaced by a new, colder spike of dread. Where did it go? Crunch, crackle. This time, the sound was from our left. Closer. It's paralleling us, Ben hissed. Run, Jenna screamed. We ran, plastic boots slipping on pine needles, our own ragged breaths tearing the night open. We scrambled across the cul-de-sac, back toward the car. Leo, I yelled, skidding to a stop. I looked back. He wasn't with us. I stopped, my light swinging wildly. Leo. I'm here. His voice came, but not from behind us. It came from inside the woods, from where the second sound had been. I'm gonna scare this fucker, hiding behind this log. Leo, no, I screamed. Get out of there. Shh. He waved us off from the shadows, a pale ghost. You guys get in the car. I'll just... His flashlight winked out, not dimmed. It just stopped. Silence. Leo, Ben called, his voice cracking. Nothing, just the wind sifting through the high branches. The smell of damp earth and rotting pine needles was overpowering. Leo, Jenna shrieked, her voice scraping with panic. Stop joking. This isn't funny. We stood there, the three of us huddled by the Civic, pointing our weak lights into the black maw. My heart was hammering so fast I thought I was going to be sick. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was like the air pressure dropping before a massive storm. We called his name for 2 minutes. It felt like 2 hours. Then, we heard a shuffle. From a completely different direction further down the road, a figure stumbled out of the forest. "God, Leo, you scared the shit out of us," Ben exhaled, sagging with relief. But as Leo walked into the spill of our headlights, the relief evaporated. It was him, but it wasn't. His pirate costume was torn at the shoulder. His hat was gone. But that wasn't the worst part. His shoes, they were covered, caked to the ankles, in thick, black mud. The kind of sucking mud you find at the bottom of a stagnant pond, but it hadn't rained in a week. And his candy bucket was gone. "Leo, are you okay?" I asked, taking one hesitant step toward him. He looked up. His face was stark white in the high beams. His eyes were empty. He was shaking, a violent, full-body tremor. "Leo, where's your candy? What did you see?" Jenna asked. Leo looked past us, at the car. Then he looked down at his muddy shoes. He opened his mouth, but only a small, choked sound came out. He raised a trembling hand and pointed at the car. We have to go," he whispered. The voice was dry and alien. "Now, please." No one argued. We shoved him in the back seat and piled in the front. Jenna fumbled with the ignition. I glanced back at Leo. He was pressed against the door, staring out the window, into the dark woods, like he was waiting for it to follow. The car filled with the smell of wet mud and something else, like rusted metal, like old pennies. Jenna threw the car into reverse. The tires spun on the gravel. As the headlights swung around the cul-de-sac, they illuminated the tree line where we'd seen the figure. Nothing was there. I was about to slam my door shut when I dropped my phone. It clattered to the ground, screen down, right by the front tire. "Damn it," I muttered, jumping out to grab it. I bent down, and the light from my phone's cracked screen lit up something on the ground, right next to my tire. It wasn't a rock. It was a small branch, maybe as long as my hand, stripped of its bark. It was still wet, and all over its surface were carvings. I picked it up. The warmth from my hand seemed to be sucked right out of it. The carvings were tiny and precise. They were hands, dozens, maybe hundreds, of tiny doll-sized handprints etched into the wood, overlapping, clawing. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran straight up my spine. It had been here, right by the car. While we were calling for Leo, it had been standing right here, watching. And it had left this. I heard a strangled noise. I looked up. Leo was watching me through the rear window. He was staring at the branch in my hand. His eyes weren't empty anymore. They were filled with a pure, absolute animal terror. He shook his head, once, a tiny, begging motion. "Don't. Get rid of it." I threw the branch like it was on fire. I scrambled into the car and slammed the lock, the click of the mechanism sounding loud as a gunshot. "Drive!" I screamed at Jenna. "Just drive!" She floored it. We fishtailed on the dirt road, the car sliding and lurching. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. Leo never told us what happened in those woods. He didn't say a word the whole ride home. He moved to Seattle 2 weeks later. We don't talk to him anymore. We, the rest of us, tried to rationalize it. It was a local playing a prank. Leo fell, hit his head, got lost, and wandered into a swampy patch. The carved hands, just part of the sick joke. We tried. That was 5 years ago. I live in Portland now. I'm a sixth-grade teacher. I teach science. Everything has a rational explanation, cause and effect. It was a long day today. Parent-teacher conferences. It was already dusk when I walked out to the school parking lot. The sky was a bruised purple, that specific northwest gray that promises a long, cold night of rain. Most of the cars were gone. Just mine, a Subaru, and the principal's truck. I could hear my own heels click-clack on the damp asphalt. The smell of diesel fumes from a bus on the main street. The smell of coming rain. I was fumbling in my bag for my keys. Then, I stopped. That feeling. The air pressure change. The feeling of being watched. I lifted my head, slowly. Across the parking lot, by the chain-link fence that borders the playground, someone was standing. Perfectly still. A dark hoodie, the hood pulled low, obscuring the face. Too far away to see features, but the posture was unmistakable. The stillness. It's just a parent, waiting, I told myself. Someone unhoused, looking for shelter. My heart started to kick. Don't be stupid. Ashland is 5 hours away. You're scaring yourself. I started walking toward my car, my eyes locked on the figure. It didn't move. It just stood. A security light on the side of the building flickered, buzzed, and snapped on, casting a sickly orange glow over the lot. The light caught something the figure was holding. It wasn't a phone. It was long and pale, a stick. The figure tilted its head, slowly, deliberately, toward me. I couldn't see a face, just deeper shadow under the hood. But I knew it was looking right at me. I've called it the Hooded Harvester in my head all these years. A stupid, pulpy name, borrowed from bad movies, to try and make it fictional. A way to cope. But as I stood there, my car keys cold in my sweating palm, I realized the truth. It wasn't a fiction. It knew where I was. And it wasn't over. Story 3. The Costume Swap. It's the details that stick, even 5 years later. Not the big, dramatic scares. You forget those. You remember the smell. October 30th, 2020. Savannah. Humid. Even that late in the year. I was 32, living in a cheap sublet near Forsyth Park, and I'd put off a costume. Badly. My office party was mandatory, and it was happening the next day. So, 10 p.m., Friday night, I was tearing through the only pop-up costume shop left open downtown. The place was a suffocating mess. Think cheap vinyl, latex, and the overpowering industrial-grade smell of spray paint mixed with stale fake blood. The back room, where they kept the premium stuff, was worse. Fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing like trapped insects. The only music was a muffled, bass-heavy thumping from a playlist trying to sound spooky. I was holding a plastic helmet and a shoddy pair of stormtrooper gloves, $80 for something that looked like it would disintegrate by midnight. Pathetic. That's when I saw her. She was leaning against a rack of cheap vampire cloaks, and she stood out like a shard of glass in a pile of velvet. Lydia Crow. I'd seen her work, or rather, the finished canvases. She was a tattoo artist in the historic district, known for this incredible, intricate black work. She was dressed like, I don't know, something gothic and stylized. A deep purple velvet dress that looked expensive, and a high-collared, heavy black mask. It covered everything from her forehead to her chin, molded with geometric, almost insect-like ridges. It looked like bone carved from obsidian. I only recognized her because of the tattoos. They coiled up her neck and spilled out from the edge of her sleeves a dense, beautiful landscape of ink. She caught me staring, and she smiled. Not a normal smile. It was slow, deliberate, and made her dark eyeliner crinkle at the corners. "Last minute?" she asked. Her voice was low, slightly husky, like smoke and bourbon. "Beyond last minute," I admitted, holding up the stormtrooper helmet. "The tragedy of the young professional." She laughed, a dry, breathy sound. "Don't do it. You'll look like a plastic toy." She pushed off the rack and walked toward me. The mask gave her an uncanny stillness. "You have good bone structure. You need something more. Tailored." She gestured toward a garment bag slung over her shoulder. It was dark leather, heavy. "I just finished a piece," she said. "Wore it once. Tonight. It's meant to be worn, not stored." I looked at the bag, then at her mask. "What is it?" "A harlequin, not the comic book kind. The original, the sadist." She paused, her head tilted. "I'm looking for a quick sale. Or a swap." "A swap?" I asked, confused. "I like the randomness, the gamble. You give me whatever you were planning to wear, and you take this." She shrugged the leather bag off her shoulder. "I'll take the $80 for the stormtrooper gear. Consider it a trade fee." It was a stupid gamble, a weird, exciting risk, but my own desperation, combined with the heady atmosphere of the shop, the noise, the dim light, and the sheer exoticism of the woman in front of me, made the choice for me. "Deal," I said. My voice sounded overly loud, juvenile. She took the stormtrooper gear, which felt flimsy in her tattooed hands. "Take the mask I'm wearing, too," she added. "It's the centerpiece." I swallowed. "You don't want it back." "No, it's finished with me." We ducked into the changing room area. The space was tiny, smelling strongly of sweat and cheap deodorizer. She waited outside my curtain. I could hear the click of the curtain rings as I pulled the thin fabric shut. Beyond it, the bass of the Halloween music thumped, doom thump, doom thump. I pulled out her costume. It was beautiful, heavy, made of midnight blue and burgundy silk, stitched with silver thread. Then, the mask. It was cold, lined with rough leather inside. I put it on. The mask was perfect. It fit my face like a second skin, molded to the bridge of my nose and my cheekbones. The eye holes were stylized, vertical slits that drastically narrowed my field of vision, but also somehow sharpened it. I turned to the full-length mirror attached to the back of the door. The reflection was stunning. The harlequin was menacing, aristocratic, a predator. As I adjusted the collar, a flicker hit the room. One of the overhead fluorescent lights died, replaced by a blinding, quick strobe effect from a display in the corner. In that rapid-fire, stop-motion light, the reflection moved. I caught a glimpse of something moving behind the display racks in the mirror, just a blur, too quick. Then, I looked at my reflection again, and behind the intricate, painted smile of the mask, I saw a change. My jawline, it looked wider, sharper. The mask wasn't just covering my face, it was shaping it. My eyes, visible through those slits, looked less like my own and more like two slivers of black ice. I pushed the curtain aside. Lydia was gone. The spot where she'd been standing was empty. No note, no sound of her leaving, just a faint, lingering scent of sandalwood and something metallic. The tone had shifted. The excited gamble gave way to a creeping unease. Wore the costume to the party. It was a smash hit. People kept their distance, though. They kept saying, You've really leaned into the character, Connor." I didn't talk much. The mask felt too good, too integrated. But when I left the office building and walked down the street, the feeling of being observed intensified. I was walking through the dense humidity of downtown Savannah. The air was thick with the scent of damp brick and Spanish moss. I turned a corner, and there she was. Lydia Crow. She was across the street, near a fountain, completely still. She was wearing my old plastic stormtrooper helmet. The absurdity of it was jarring, but she wasn't looking at the helmet. She was looking at me. Even through the cheap, black visor of the helmet, I could feel the intensity of her stare. It was possessive, satisfied, like a hungry person watching someone else eat a meal they prepared. I stopped. The street noise, a distant siren, a nearby group of revelers seemed to mute out. Just the two of us, separated by the width of the street. I raised a hand, a hesitant wave. She didn't wave back. She slowly raised her hand, then lowered it to the base of her throat. A deliberate gesture, mine. A yellow taxi pulled between us, blocking the view for just a second. When it was gone, she was gone too, vanished into the shadows of the old buildings. The unease turned into acute, cold anxiety. I got back to my sublet, ripped the silk costume off, and collapsed into bed. I don't remember setting my alarm or even turning off the lights. The exhaustion was absolute. I woke up the next morning, Halloween, to the sound of rain drumming against the bay window. I felt different, not just tired, heavy. The kind of weight that comes from carrying something dense all night. I dragged myself into the bathroom and flipped the light switch. The overhead bulb buzzed to life. I looked into the mirror. My face. It was mine. Connor Lane, 32. But the contours were sharper. The skin around my eyes seemed drawn tighter. A network of fine, almost imperceptible lines radiated from my mouth, like scars that were just beginning to set. I leaned closer, running a hand over my cheek. The sensation was dull, numb. Then, I opened my mouth to say my name. Connor. The word was clear, but the timbre was wrong. It was a semitone lower than I remembered, deeper, drier. It didn't resonate in my chest the way it should. It sounded like a voice that had just been tuned, adjusted. I tried again. I'm Connor Lane. The voice in the mirror was cold, authoritative. It lacked my usual sarcastic lilt. It was Lydia's voice. Not exactly, but the same deep, smoky resonance. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The mask hadn't just reshaped my face, it had been a conduit. A trade, a swap, and it was more than just the costume. I spent the next hour pacing the small apartment. The costume, the Harlequin, lay in a heap on the floor. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I made coffee, my movements stiff, feeling like I was inhabiting a new, slightly heavier skeleton. The silence of the apartment was suffocating. I needed to leave. I packed a suitcase quickly, just throwing clothes in. I was getting out of Savannah, now. I pulled out my phone to check my bank balance for a ticket. The screen lit up. The first thing that popped into my feed, an algorithm serving me pure, cold dread, was a new post on Craigslist under the For Sale Barter section. It had been posted just hours ago, time-stamped 300 a.m. The headline was simple, capitalized, and absolute costume swap. You'll never forget this mask. Looking for something innocuous. No time wasters. The listing was posted under the name Lydia C. I didn't look at the picture. I didn't need to. I slammed the phone down and grabbed my keys. I walked out of my apartment, pulled the heavy door shut, and started down the stairs. The deep, resonant voice that had replaced mine spoke a single word into the humid, quiet morning. Mine. Story 4, The Blackwell Manor, a true Halloween horror story. I was 29 in 2018, a freelance filmmaker. I'd seen the guts of the industry, the rigged jump scares, the plastic props, the wires taped under floorboards. My assignment was a fluffy behind-the-scenes piece on the biggest commercial haunt in the mid-Atlantic Blackwell Manor in Ravenwood, Pennsylvania. The manor itself was a sprawling Victorian mess, all peeling paint and fake Gothic spires. I met Mr. Everett Blackwell, the owner, at the staff entrance. He was 58, immaculately dressed in a gray tweed blazer that looked too warm for the late October chill. His demeanor was unnervingly calm, a flat professional tranquility that seemed entirely at odds with the fake chaos he sold. His handshake was dry, cool, and oddly prolonged. "Ms. Montgomery," he said, his voice a smooth, low baritone. "We rarely permit this level of access, but I admire your commitment to the craft." He led us inside. Ryan, my cameraman, kept his lens wide, capturing the deep shadows of the main foyer. Even empty, the place was an assault on the senses. The air was heavy with the smell of ozone, rubber prosthetics, and the sickly sweet odor of cheap corn syrup used for blood. The environmental sound was the first thing that hit you. It never stopped. There was the low, electric hum of a distant fog machine struggling to fill a room 2 corridors away, overlaid by the ambient scream track, a seamless, looping montage of shrieks, whimpers, and chains. It was designed to push you to the edge of hearing, forcing your nervous system into a state of constant, low-grade alert. "The sonic substrate," Mr. Blackwell explained, his voice easily cutting through the noise. "Your conscious mind ignores it, but your limbic system doesn't, always on edge." We moved through the public areas. The corridors were dimly lit, lined with thick, fake cobwebs that snagged on your clothes. Our footsteps echoed Ryan's heavy boots, my lighter sneakers a rhythmic, isolated thud, thud, thud against the manufactured panic of the soundtrack. We passed the ghostly mannequins' plastic bodies draped in burial shrouds, their vacant, glass eyes staring into the dark. I pointed out the pressure plates and the hidden air cannons to the camera, my tone one of curious enthusiasm. It was all just stagecraft, all theater. "It's all about misdirection, Ms. Montgomery," Blackwell said, tapping a finger on a fake tombstone. "We sell the experience." The idea of terror. After an hour, Blackwell ushered us toward the basement stairs, a cold, steep run of stone steps. "Now for the engine room," he said. As soon as the heavy, padded door shut behind us, the world changed. The ambient scream track vanished. The silence wasn't just a lack of noise. It was a physical vacuum. It felt cold and crushing, a deep-sea pressure after hours spent underwater. My ears rang with the sudden, disorienting quiet. The control room was a concrete bunker, smelling faintly of old coolant and dust. It was dominated by a large workstation with 6 glowing monitors. Blackwell sat down and gestured toward a control panel. "This is how we orchestrate the final act," he explained. He pressed a button. A heavy metal clank reverberated from somewhere high above. "We lock them in for 15 seconds before the final lights come on. Leaves an indelible impression." I felt a sudden, profound unease. It was the first moment I questioned his casual sadism. "Mr. Blackwell," I said, my voice sounding flat and weak in the silence. "We have enough footage of the mechanisms. Could we go, I feel like? We've overstayed our welcome." He didn't look at me. He was focused on one of the smaller inset monitors. It was displaying a room I had not seen on the tour, a dark, narrow space with a high ceiling, lined with what looked like rusted metal cages. "We didn't pass through this room," I stated, moving closer to the console. Not everything is for public consumption," he murmured, his eyes still fixed on the screen. "Some spaces are reserved for staff." On the monitor, a subtle movement caught my eye. A figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a tattered white gown and moving with a slow, sickening sway. One of the ghostly mannequins. "Do you have actors rehearsing?" I asked, forcing a light tone. "Just running through the final blocking." Blackwell finally turned. The stillness of his smile was the darkest thing I had ever seen. "Miss Montgomery, you are a filmmaker. You understand that the best performance is one where the talent doesn't know they are being recorded." The chilling realization dawned on me not through a crash or a scare, but through the cold, stark light of the monitors. I looked at the other 5 screens. Monitor 2, a long, empty corridor, unfamiliar. As I watched, a door at the far end didn't open. It was yanked inward and slammed shut. A violent, instantaneous event. Too fast for a human. Too sudden for hydraulics. Monitor 3, a dirty bathroom. A yellowed clawfoot tub. And in the tub, something floating. It had the shape and texture of a waterlogged torso. Monitor 4, a static-filled image of a closed, locked door. And then, a hand slapped against the inside of the door, smearing condensation. A real hand. I spun toward Blackwell. "What the hell is this? These rooms, are these still in the house?" He rose from the chair. He looked physically larger now, filling the entire scope of the bunker. "You thought you signed on for a documentary. You signed on for participation." He gestured to a small, isolated monitor in the corner, the one I had completely ignored, thinking it was system diagnostics. It was a live feed of our room. Our terrified faces were glaring back at us, my hair slightly messy, Ryan's jaw slack. As we watched, a red, scrolling marquee ran across the bottom of the screen. "Live feed final access. Viewers 124,000. My stomach seized. The psychological dread was absolute. "We never shut down entirely," Blackwell whispered, moving toward me with terrifying slowness. "We have a dedicated audience, Ms. Montgomery, who pays handsomely to see unscripted fear. The actors went home hours ago. You and your cameraman are the final talent." My blood ran cold. I was locked in a commercially viable torture chamber, and my rising terror was being broadcast live for profit. "Open the door," I demanded, the composure failing. He shook his head, looking almost tender. "Your curiosity, your hesitation, your dawning terror. It's a gold mine. The audience loves the behind-the-scenes transition." He flipped a massive, exposed red switch. An electric motor roared to life somewhere deep in the floor. The heavy metal door to the control room unlocked with a resonant, metallic sigh. "Time for the free roam portion," Blackwell said, stepping back from the control panel. "Go, Isla. Give them a show." We didn't hesitate. We scrambled up the stone steps, back into the house's throat. The sound returned, but now it was a deafening, monotonous shriek, no longer ambient but focused. As we sprinted down the main corridor, I glanced one last time at the line of ghostly mannequins. They were all there, staring into the middle distance, except for one, the tall figure in the tattered white dress. It was standing 2 feet from where it had been 5 minutes ago, and its head was tilted. And then, as I flew past, I saw at the eyes, glassy, vacant, but they were tracking me. We found a locked side door, used Ryan's camera like a battering ram, shattering the lens, but breaking the lock, and tumbled out into the cold, clean night. We didn't stop running until we hit the state line. I filed the report. The police visited Blackwell Manor. Mr. Blackwell was cooperative, gracious, and provided floor plans showing no secret bunker. His corporate lawyers sent me a chillingly precise cease and desist. It was dismissed as an overzealous Halloween prank. I quit filmmaking a month later. I moved to Seattle. I eventually deleted the edited documentary footage, but I kept the raw files from Ryan's smashed camera. I had to. It was the only tangible proof I had that it happened. It is now 5 years later. I am in my home office in Seattle, auditing my old external hard drives. I pull up the last clip from that day, the one recorded in the hallway before we went into the basement. I am about to delete it for good. I click pause. My computer screen is large, glossy. I see myself, Isla, frozen in the frame, adjusting the sleeve of my jacket and looking right at Ryan's lens. And then, I see it. Not in the footage, in the static reflection of the screen itself. My editing room is dark behind me, but in the glossy screen surface, over my shoulder, where the room should be empty, there is something. A tall, indistinct white shape, the same long, dark hair, the ghostly figure from the manor. It is standing there, right behind my chair. I whip my head around. Nothing. Just the dark, familiar corners of my apartment. I turn back to the monitor. The shape is gone from the reflection. Only my own wide-eyed face remains. But on the paused footage, the clip recorded at Blackwell Manor, the figure in the tattered white dress, one of the mannequins, is now looking straight at the lens. They said the haunted house was an experience. But I think it was a transaction. I walked away with a scar, and I think something followed me out. The ambient scream track, the one that never stops in the manor, I hear it sometimes, very faintly, in the deepest silence. Halloween ends when the lights go out, when the masks come off, when the fake blood dries and everyone tells themselves it was all just pretend. Short silence, faint clock ticking. But some stories don't stop when the candy's gone. Some doors don't stay closed after October ends. Every Halloween, someone tries to chase the thrill a little too far, and the dark remembers them. Low metallic hum, like a power line vibrating. Maybe you'll forget these stories tomorrow, or maybe, when you walk past a porch light flickering alone in the fog, you'll remember one. Long pause, faint footsteps behind the listener, single creak of wood. If you hear a knock after midnight, don't say trick or treat. Just don't answer at all. This has been Fearmonger. If you're still awake, subscribe, and tell us where you're listening from, and what time it is right now. Because the shadows, they always keep track of time.